Jack and Tom had been best friends since childhood, growing up in the quiet town of Stillwater, nestled deep in the forests of northern Michigan. Life in Stillwater was slow, predictable, and peaceful, except for the stories. Their town had one peculiar feature: Black Hollow Lake. It wasn't particularly large, nor was it deep, but it had a reputation. The older folks whispered about it in hushed tones, about the ones who had disappeared over the years. They'd say, "The lake doesn't give back what it takes." But Jack and Tom never paid much attention to those stories. Both men, now in their late 20s, were avid fishermen, spending countless weekends casting their lines into Black Hollow Lake. It had become a ritual, an escape from their mundane jobs and small-town boredom. One evening in early autumn, as the crisp air turned the leaves into fiery hues, they decided to take their fishing trip a step further: an overnight excursion. "You sure about this?" Tom asked, loading gear into their old aluminum boat. Jack grinned. "Come on, man. We've fished here 100 times. What's the difference?" "The difference is we usually leave before dark." Jack chuckled. "You scared of the lake goblin or whatever nonsense old man Parker talks about?" Tom rolled his eyes but said nothing. He couldn't shake the feeling that staying overnight was tempting fate. Still, he didn't want Jack to think he was scared, so he climbed into the boat, and they rowed out to their favorite spot near the center of the lake. The sun dipped below the horizon as they cast their lines. The night air was cold and still, save for the occasional croak of a bullfrog or the whisper of the wind through the trees. They drank beer, shared old stories, and laughed under the moonlight. But something felt off. The water seemed darker than usual, almost like ink. The ripples on the surface didn't seem natural. And every so often, Tom swore he saw something move beneath the boat. A shadow, long and twisting, just beyond the range of his flashlight. "Did you see that?" Tom asked, gripping his fishing rod tighter. "See what?" Jack took a swig from his beer. "Something under us. Big." Jack smirked. "Probably a catfish." Tom wasn't convinced, but he didn't argue. They continued fishing, but neither of them caught anything. It was as if the lake had gone completely still, holding its breath. Then, just past midnight, Tom's line went taut. "Got one," he shouted, reeling it in. The rod bent almost to the breaking point. "Damn. Must be a monster," Jack said, grabbing a flashlight to illuminate the water. As Tom struggled with the line, something surfaced. A pale, bloated hand. Tom yelped and dropped his rod. The hand, lifeless and swollen, disappeared back into the black water with barely a ripple. "Did you see that?" Tom gasped, scrambling backward. Jack's face had gone pale. "Yeah, that wasn't a fish." A chill ran through them as the boat rocked slightly. The water around them was eerily silent. Then, something knocked against the hull. A dull, wet thud. Tom shone his flashlight over the side of the boat. For a moment, the beam caught something just beneath the surface. A face. Or what used to be one. The skin was gray, the eyes milky white. The mouth twisted into something between a grimace and a smile. The water distorted the features, making them ripple unnaturally. Then the thing moved. With impossible speed, it lunged upward, hands grasping the edge of the boat. The smell hit them first, rotting lakeweed and decay. Jack and Tom screamed as the thing heaved itself partially out of the water. It was humanoid, but wrong. Its fingers were long and bony, its skin covered in patches of algae and peeling flesh. Water poured from its gaping mouth as it made a guttural choking noise, like it was trying to speak. The boat rocked violently as Tom grabbed an oar and swung at the creature. The wood cracked against its skull, but it barely flinched. Instead, it dug its fingers deeper into the boat's rim, pulling itself higher. Jack grabbed a fishing knife and slashed at one of the thing's hands. A thick, black liquid oozed from the wound, but the creature didn't make a sound. Instead, it turned its empty eyes toward him and opened its mouth wider. A bubble of lake water gurgled from its throat, and then it laughed. A deep, gurgling, drowned laugh. Jack's mind snapped. He scrambled to the engine, yanking the cord desperately. It sputtered and died. The creature lunged. Tom shoved Jack aside and slammed the oar into its face again, this time hard enough to send it tumbling backward into the water. It vanished beneath the surface without a splash. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, the boat jerked. Something was underneath them, pushing up, trying to tip them over. "The flares!" Jack shouted, reaching into the tackle box. His fingers fumbled as he grabbed one, struck it, and threw it into the water. The lake exploded in eerie red light. For just a moment, they saw it. Dozens of pale figures drifting just below the surface. Watching, waiting. Tom roared as he yanked at the engine cord again. This time, the motor roared to life. The boat surged forward, nearly throwing them both overboard. They didn't look back as they raced toward shore, the flare's glow fading behind them. When they finally reached land, they tumbled out of the boat, gasping for breath. The lake was still again, as if nothing had happened. Neither of them spoke. They simply gathered their things and drove away, leaving their boat behind. They never fished at Black Hollow Lake again. But sometimes, on quiet nights, they swore they could hear it. The faint sound of laughter bubbling up from the depths.